Michael J., your host. We've got a great show today. We're going to actually discuss, and I think this is an important topic. We're going to discuss the Supreme Court of the United States of America. This is going to be an interview with Justice Stephen Breyer just after he retired. So we're going to get a bit of an insight, which is a very rare peek behind the scenes of the thought process of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. The interviewer is Amanpour and Company. We're also going to go into a little bit of philosophy and how it relates to the overall picture, and even into canon law. You say, canon law, what the heck is that? Well, for some people that do not understand certain histories, prior to common law, within the Commonwealth, the United States of America, or North America for that matter, prior to common law, you had canon law, and that was the law of the church. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because you get religion still influencing the way things are done, the way people think. They're shaping still the way people think, because it's carried on from a bygone era and continually carried on and prevails in the ideology of the cranial structure of the human being, no matter what religion you prescribe to. And I say prescribe to because it's just like a prescription. I'm Islam. I'm Christian. I'm atheist. Is atheist a religion? Probably not categorically, but nonetheless, I did have to bring it, shed a light on it. But for the most part in North America, it's the Bible, which is Christianity, which has spread all around the world. But understand, it's just a religion. Is all it is. So now we're going to go to our shared screen, because I share this with the people, from the people to the people, and for the people. Damn. I want your vote. Do I want your vote? I couldn't give two friggin' flying hoots. But nonetheless, just a hello will suffice. So here we are. Justice Breyer, Scotus, he's being interviewed. Pretty good interviewer. Amanpour and Company. 8 months ago. Let's look at some of the comments. Wow, I like Justice Breyer. What an incredible speaker. Separation of church versus state is so important. It's frightening what is happening in the U.S. these days. I really like Justice Breyer. I could watch and listen to him for hours. The separation of faith from politics and law exists for a reason. It exists to prevent a very small minority of religious believers imposing their belief systems on everybody else. We cannot have faiths determining laws. Way too many faiths, it would be chaos. You know, there's some excellent points, great viewpoints, and this is why comments are quite important. And then the Scotus create an oligarchy here since 2010 Citizens United. It's why they receive so many expensive gifts, the few we know of. Well, I'm not sure of what 2010 Citizens United is, but I'm going to pivot to a recent ruling by the Supreme Court of the United States of America, and that was giving immunity to a United States president. At the time, they provided immunity when he was past president, was running to become president-elect, and then actually became president-elect. And for the first time since the Constitution, now let's look at the Constitution. done in convention by the unanimous consent of the states, present the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord, 1787. So, since this date, in the year of our Lord, 1787, not one. Is that one? Yeah, that's one. Not one president since the first day of this Constitution, not one president needed to go to a court, and the highest court of the land, to ask for an immunity ruling. So why was that necessary in the year 2024? There is no reason why that would be necessary to be heard by any court of the land. You've got enough precedents. I'd like to think you got enough precedents since 1787. This is 2024. This year is 2024. And not one person has needed to get immunity from the highest court in the land. So nonetheless, we're just going to backtrack a bit here now, and we're going to talk we're going to discuss revelations pursuant to the preamblings of a former Supreme Court of the United States justice who just recently wrote a book, and his way of thinking, which gives us a bit of a backdoor, not a total backdoor, because there's now 9 justices, and this is only one, and he's a past judge. So let's put that in a contextual parenthesis in order to provide understandings contextually, and applying a contextual understanding from an opinion, my opinion, which will be subjective and arbitrary, to my understandings and how I wish to present it to you, the general public. Yikes. Did he say that, Mo? 3 wise men, Larry, Curly, and Mo. They stated in unison. Wise guy, eh? Abso-friggin-lutely. Gotta have some humor, folks. Life is too short.
Now, all over
on
the
with
world,
the show.
women-led social and peace movements are on the rise, while at the same time, the fight for women's fundamental rights continues, including in the state of Florida, which has cleared the way for the state's 6-week abortion ban to take effect. But in a separate ruling, its Supreme Court justices have...
Okay, so I'm already going to interject. And I'm going to say, well, why are you going back to, because we know what ruling, the Dobbs ruling, 50 years of precedence. Every Supreme Court of Justice has appeared before Congress and said, it's already precedence in law. We will not change it. It's already precedence in law. And what do? Between 2023 and 2024, they change it. They lied to the people. No, they didn't lie. They made bald representations, you say. Oh, just a bald representation? That's an assertion. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. So, they lied. Good golly, he's gone back to that word again? Yes. The Supreme Court of the United States of America, which is the top court of the land, everybody is supposed to bow down. Say, yes, yes, what you say, yes, yes, what you say is absolute. Fiddlesticks. There was a Canadian prime minister that said to a guy by the name of Richard Nixon that the only guy, Watergate, etc., fuddle-duddle. That's what fuddle-duddle meant, folks. So there you go. So now, here we have a country that's been divided by abortion. The issue is abortion. For over 50 years, divided a country. One side's pro-abortion. The other side says pro-life, anti-abortion. And they've been fighting for dominance forever and ever, but Wade, Dobbs, precedents for over 50 years. All the Supreme Court nominees stated it's already precedents in law. We will not change it. I will not change it. This is my viewpoint. This is how I represent, how I'm going to conduct my affairs as I go forward in a position of unlimited tenor. Tenor? What do you say? Tenor? What does tenor mean? It's a lifetime position till they drop dead. Simple as that. Drop dead within the construct of this third dimensional reality that you live within. Does that mean end of life? Not necessarily. Does it mean so within this life? Maybe. So here's the deal. They fight pro-life, anti-abortion, abortion, and the right of a human being to make their own decisions. Free will and freedom of choice is a really big card, folks. Even though it really tugs on your heartstrings with the anti-abortion crowd, pro-life crowd. But here's the thing. And this is where you've not stopped and said, why do we argue back and forth? Why don't we just create a solution? You say, damn. Create a solution? Oh, God, that hurts my ego. That was the ego. That's how the ego reacts, and it pushes back. So here's the thing. Why have you not created birthing centers? Why have you not created birthing centers that eliminates this argument back and forth? And then the question may thereafter be, well, Michael, what's the cost? And I say, what's the cost by not doing it? You got some brilliant minds. You could actually offload a task in order to be able to create a framework of a construct that actually supports creating birthing centers, that helps women, that eliminates that fight back and forth. And you say, damn, is that possible? Anything is possible. It's based on your beliefs. And you say, well, money. You always get back to money. Money is just a construct. And once you understand the 2008 financial crisis in Obama, and let's not muddy the waters here, whether you like Obama or not, he dealt with the financial crisis of 2008 in a way that nobody before had. 1929, 1930s. So 2008, they provided a lever of financial restitution to create a way to bail out companies that were considered a tangible asset to the degree that they needed to survive. So what did they do? They bailed out the financial system. They bailed out the car makers. The only one that didn't need a bailout at that time was Ford. But this went against the capitalist way of thinking, previous banking way of doing things, and that old Darwinian ideology way of things, survival of the fittest, just crawl on somebody else's back, and if you're not fit, just discard you like a friggin' piece of crap at the side of the road and let the street sweepers clean it up and dispose of it, because I have no humility, I have no compassion, and I do not have any understanding of what benevolence is. Damn, did I say that? Yes, I did. Okay, so that's the abortion issue. Let's move forward.
Have allowed the issue to be put to voters in November for a proposed constitutional amendment. Meanwhile, in the first abortion-related case since overturning Roe versus Wade, the U.S. Supreme Court appears skeptical of a nationwide ban on the drug that's used for medical abortions. Interpreting the Constitution for modern America is, of course, the divisive legal dilemma of the times. And the former Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer tackles this head-on in his new book, which he speaks about next with Walter Isaacson.
Thank you, Christian and Justice Stephen Breyer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So you have this new book, Reading the Constitution, and you talk about the problems of being too much involved in textualism. Explain to me what textualism is, and is that the same as originalism?
When you read a statute?
Okay, so before we get into that, we are going to do a little classroom study. Okay? So now, textualism. What is textualism? The definition of textualism. What is the meaning of textualism? So let's just quickly look at this Wikipedia version. Textualism is a formalist theory in which the interpretation of the law is based exclusively on the ordinary meaning of the legal text. And then we're going to get pragmatism. What is pragmatism? So, even if you got the Stanford, Cambridge, all the different meanings, let's just look at this here. Pragmatism is a philosophical tradition that views language and thought and reason, as tools for prediction, problem solving, and action. And then we get textualism. What is textualism? We get an AI overview. Should we look at the AI overview? So the AI overview, textualism and pragmatism are two different legal theories for interpreting the Constitution and statutes. And that can be applied to anything, any text of any type. So textualism, the idea, but they're right away, the AI reverts to the Constitution. So we'll just leave as is. We're not going to go deeper into this rabbit hole. So the idea that the Constitution should be interpreted by reading the text as it was understood when it was written. So, what about originalism? Originalism, you say? Is there such a thing? Yeah, there is such a thing. Oh, here we go. Textualism versus originalism. Holy crap. Is that possible? Sure is. Okay, so here, there's no AI overview available for this type of search. Damn, really? AI is not on the ball? It is. It's just taking a back seat in this situation. So the difference between them is one of scope, not philosophy. You notice philosophy comes up a couple times now. Originalism specifically refers to interpreting the Constitution based on the meaning the words carried at the time of writing. So if it was 1778, what did they mean at that time? That's originalism. What did they mean at that time? Doesn't matter that life was totally different at that time. and the applicable understanding of how it should be applied to the present, yikes, did I say that? So why would you apply something that was meant within the contextual understanding of what life was like in 1778 and apply it to situations in 2023 or 2024? It makes no sense, but this is what some people do. And they actually do. On the top court in the land that is the overlord of all the courts, to provide precedents for all to follow suit, to give a sense of direction for the consciousness of the country, uses originalism, interpreting the Constitution based on the meaning of the words carried at the time of writing, whereas textualism refers to interpreting all legal text by the ordinary meaning of the text, setting aside factors not in the blah, 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 whatever that will be. So we've got this gentleman, textualism versus pragmatism. And to be pragmatic is to be grounded in something that is using thought and reason that would make most sense. That's all. That's what pragmatism is. Very simple. So let's go back to the original conversation that's going to start here now with Stephen Breyer, former Associate Justice at the U.S. Supreme Court, sat there for a long time, has a lot of experience, but understand, this is from his viewpoint. I have a viewpoint. This is from his viewpoint. And then you're going to look at further separation, and this is why we got a real big problem. You're going to say left and right. Left-leaning, right-leaning. Left-leaning, right-wing. You know, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, up, left, right, left. You know, it's not a march. It's not a military march. But you create this separation because you create an attachment, an affinity with this separation, and then you start believing in this side or that side. So it gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling. And so no matter what rationale in conversation has been presented that might be pragmatic, might be more appealing for the overall masses on both sides of the fence, you've got to lean this way, you got to lean that way. And then you've got these people that are centrist, but really they're not centrist. They do lean this way or that way for the most part. But they say they're centrist because it makes them feel better because it gives them a different position. Makes them feel good too. So you got this really interesting dichotomy of variations and contrasts going on at all times. Usually, no, all the time, dictated by the ego, the mind. And you say, damn you, the mind. But isn't a good mind important? Yeah, a good mind is important. Once you understand you are not your mind, you're saying, what? You're taking me down another rabbit hole? Yes, you are not your mind. You've been convinced you are your mind. You've had this avatar created, the many mass of the person that was born on a certain day, within this incorporation of this municipality, of this state, of this province, of this country, of this, you know, I go on and on and on and on. So you create this avatar of existence. And in this instance, this is the avatar of Stephen Breyer, who has a storybook of life. His life in this lifetime. He was born on a certain day. He's lived up to this point in time. And he's going to expire on a certain day. Yes, he has an expiry date. And it's unbeknownst to anybody, except for him on an unconscious level. What? Yeah. So let's listen. I digress too much.
Read the Constitution. There are some words. Look at those words. And you say, what would an ordinary person have thought those words meant at the time they were written? say 1788, 1789. And real textualists say don't look at anything else. Just look at those words and things related maybe to those words, not much, but read the words. And originalism says, yes, we agree with that, but in the Constitution, there's some rather vague words. The right to keep and bear arms is not actually specific, not very specific. And the freedom of speech is less specific yet. So what we do is go back in our minds to the time that those words were written.
Interesting concept, right? Let's look at the right to bear arms, and this is where it's a really tricky thing. What did they mean by the right to bear arms in 1778? Well, they were worried about the British invading. Didn't have much of an army, didn't have much organized in that way, so army, militia, whatever you want to call it. So they wrote in the right to bear arms so that they could actually, everybody would form the militia to help defend the country. Simple as that. So because of that, it's been created to everybody's got the right to bear arms in perpetuity, which makes no friggin' sense because nobody needs a gun to kill food for the most part, or kill for food. You can go to a supermarket. There's grocery stores. But your mind, your ego, I need a gun. But the problem with everybody having a gun is we've created all this separation through the duality of existence, of life, where we've created class systems and people are better than other people, and my way is better than your way is less appropriate compared to my way, instead of embracing and loving one another. But nonetheless, in order to be able to determine who is superior, we've given you the ability to have a gun and just shoot people at will. And you do that, and people do that. And you allow that, and you continually allow that, which is the dumbest friggin' thing. I'm holding back on my choice of words. The dumbest friggin' thing that could ever happen. And it makes you feel good, warm and fuzzy. Like, give me a friggin' break. Back to the show.
1788, 1787, 1869 for 14, 15, 16, around that time after the Civil War or at the founding of the country, and say, what would an ordinary person have thought they meant at that time?
And you, in this book, push back on that and
Yes,
say we should put more emphasis on the purpose. And by the way, on the effect, the pragmatic effect, and shouldn't just be parsing the words. We should say, what was the purpose of it and what pragmatic outcome it will have? Explain the difference.
So you understand parsing. Even when you're building code for a computer, you want it to parse. So it gives it a sense of direction. So when you're parsing something, in what direction are you going to take it? So parsing is an understanding. And so once you know a code on a computer level, 0 and 1. That's all, bits and bytes, 0 and 1, 0 and 1. So they mean the same thing, but 0 means nothing, but yet it means something. But 1 is fixed. There. Showing you how the universe works in a very simple manner.
That approach.
Well, the difference is that the statutes that we interpret in the Supreme Court are usually not clear in terms of their text. If they're so clear, why are they in the Supreme Court? We only take cases where lower court judges have come to different opinions about what they mean. And with the Constitution, too, same kind of a problem, but even more so. So I don't think too often the text helps very much, and it can lead you astray.
Well, let's take some of the criticism that an originalist or a textualist would have of your pragmatic approach, which is, man, that could just lead you down a path where you're not emphasizing what the words actually say. You're just trying to say, what do I think would be good? What do I think would be pragmatic?
Yeah.
Isn't that dangerous to allow judges to impose their own pragmatic view of the world instead of following the text?
Well, the word pragmatic is not exactly the right word either. And if you have the patience to read the whole thing, you'll see that what I'm saying is, yes, look at the purposes. Look at the consequences. Look at the values that underlie it.
So in other words, contextual understanding, and that's a variable in each and every instance, because each and every instance, like every moment or every event in time as you know it, is going to be contextually different. Just like watching a movie. A movie, you got so many frames and they're put together in a certain way. And it's the same thing. Contextually, each frame has no contextual understanding. But it's through the melding of all these frames together, it gives a contextual understanding, an emotion, etc., etc. I hope that makes sense. Now, nonetheless, we're going to pivot here, and we're going to go to the old religion card. Now, I'm going to tell you my personal view. Religion is the worst pox on society that has ever happened since the beginning of time of the modern man as we know it. Just saying, folks. That's my position, okay? And I'm not wavering. I'm not wavering. So here we go. That's the Constitution. Now, we're going to understand an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Because, I'm going to tell you, I never read the Bible, but there's a King William's version, there's an Old Testament, King William's, King whatever version, which some people think is the Scottish Rite of the Masons say that's the absolute Bible of all Bibles. You've got pre and après versions of the Bible. So, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. We're going to discuss. We're going to get just one example. And I think this is an okay example because everybody interprets an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You got to I just interpret as just be fair in all your trade with other people, whether it be emotional trade in a relationship, whether it's in business where you're trading in goods. So let it be a guide to be fair and balanced in all your affairs, externally, in all relationships with all things. That's a broad-based explanation. But nonetheless, we have this gentleman here, got 1,700,000 views 7 years ago. Pastor Steve Wilkins. That's a Presbyterian church in Monroe, L.A. This goes back 7 years ago. His version.
God has always required his people to be like him. And because we're made after his image. That's exactly why we have to.
So what is the image of God? Here's another thing. Do I believe in God? Damn, that's a tough question to answer because God, in the version that has been created, the construct of man, woman, child, son, daughter, blah, 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 blah. Is there a God of any type, whether it's Muslim, whether it's anything, Christian, whatever? Is there a God really? No, there isn't. But that is my point of view. Now, is there a divine creator? Absolutely. How can you say there is no God, but yet you say there is in absolute terms, there is a divine creator? Well, if you think man, you got to understand everything by design is just phenomenal how it's designed. Man and a woman can create things, but you can create things just out of nothing anyway. And you wonder, wow, how do you do that? Well, I'm not going to create $1 million $1,000 bill in my hand. I'm not going to create a stack of $100 bills in my hands, but I'm a creator of everything and all things. Everything and all things since the Neanderthal has been created by man. It's not immaculate conception. You bought into a story of immaculate conception. Have you ever seen immaculate conception? Absolutely not. You're looking for a Messiah. What Messiah? I can put 20 strangers in a circle. I can sit in the center and point to each one and say, you're a Messiah, you're a Messiah, you're a Messiah, you're a Messiah, you're a Messiah. And I can do that with the whole world's population, approximately 8 billion people, and do the exact same thing. Do you get where I'm coming from? Probably not. So let's go back to the sermon here.
To love one another and love the world and care for our neighbor and even care for our enemies.
That's important.
The Pharisees and the chief priests and the scribes had twisted God's word that he had given to Israel out of context. Consequently, they were acting more like sons of Satan than sons of God. That's what Jesus calls them, you remember.
Sons of Satan. You have sinned. What a friggin' albatross to carry from birth. You have sinned. You have sinned, and you got to spend your whole life seeking redemption. Why don't you just friggin' forgive yourself? Like, why do you spend a life in friggin' sin, grief, sorrow, creating depression, and all these stupid things that you manifest from the mind? Makes no sense.
Because they were rebelling against God, following their own opinions, their own ideas of good and evil, rather than what God had revealed to them. And so here he's seeking to set it straight, set everybody straight. This is what you've heard, he says sometimes. Here's what the truth is. And he affirms a righteousness that far exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. So I want to look at this passage we read. And it begins with a very familiar passage. You hear it all the time. It's almost as famous as John 3:16. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. We're told that over and over again, even though nobody knows what that means, or at least they think they know what it means. It means if you punch me, I get to punch you, only harder. That's the rule.
Then you got to remember, this is over 2,000, the Bible, because we're referring to Jesus and the spoken word from God through the eyes and mouth of Jesus, a living person, 2,000 years ago. Just like the Supreme Court of the United States of America, through the eyes of the spoken word of our founders of 1778. You see a pattern here? Everything you read, you hear, you go to school, your parents, you live a certain thing, you've created an avatar. You're an avatar. You wear many masks, and one of those masks is you're given a name. And so you create an avatar based on that name, based on a birth date. So you create truths from belief systems. Every once in a while, science will change those truths. So a lot of truths are moving goalposts at all times. Certain truths are fixed, but not too many, because of our lack of understanding and ability to develop understandings, because we get so caught up in the game and playing the game. So that's the deal. So now here we are. We're trying to take something, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, 2,000 years ago. May not have meant poke a guy's eye out. Rip a person's tooth out. Like, it's pretty brutal. Pain and suffering from a loving God? Come on now. So this guy's going to give us a reasonable explanation of how people that follow this religion and scriptures should possibly interpret such a stating. Because, if God's all loving, then he's all forgiving, and he accepts all people as they are. Just saying, folks.
If you break my tooth, I get to break all of your teeth. That's the way people view it. And, of course, that is not at all what God intended by this law. This is called the lex talionis.
So has he spoken to God? Has anybody spoken to God? I speak to God all the time. Guess what? I'm not going there, boys and gals.
It's given to us in Exodus 21 and in Leviticus 24. And it had a couple of purposes. It was first to be a rule for judges, to make sure that their judgments, their punishments that they meted out for crimes, for whatever the...
See, punishments. This is where we'll get into the cycle of punishing everybody. Nobody does anything to help somebody to rehabilitate, to live a better life, to have a different understanding that maybe their actions were inappropriate. Benevolence, compassion. Compassion, benevolence. Very simple sauce. You can do a lot of wonderful baking with two things: compassion, benevolence. Just saying.
The dispute were just. They weren't too harsh, or they weren't too lenient. So if a man hit me and broke my tooth, you couldn't kill him for that. He didn't commit murder, he broke my tooth. So you have to give him a punishment that's equivalent to a broken tooth. Something that meets the crime. The punishment ought to fit the crime.
Equivalency, you say. But we're just talking about balance. Now, do we really need to punish people? Because throughout life, we've created separation. We've created this Darwinian way of thinking, pitting one person against another people or peoples. Survival of the fittest. And you've seen it, the conscience of countries that have created world wars. And even now, we got one guy saying, oh, wow, my button's bigger than your button, and using a nuclear war as a threat. That's got to be the dumbest thing to actually live in fear because a guy's going to create a nuclear war. Why would you fear that? That is just plain stupid. Unless a person is an nihilist. And then we all start over again. Simple as that.
And so in the Bible, if you steal something, God doesn't say, cut his hand off. That's Islam.
Punishment. Punishment is different depending on what you prescribe to. Doctor, I need a prescription. Do you want a hand or do you want to lose a hand? Okay, so we've gone far enough for this. So let's move on. Back to Sir? No, he does not have a coronet, so he's not a sir, so he has no peerage because of lineage of person, of family, of successors. He is Justice Breyer.
Because that's the better alternative. What about trying the right to bear arms? We had a case involving a New York law. I was in dissent. But the majority said, here's what we'll look to. We'll look to what the founders intended. At the time, they wrote these words. That was Madison. In an earlier case, they said what they'd intended. They intended to allow you to keep a pistol under your pillow. I dissented in that because I don't think they meant that one little bit. But what I'm objecting to now is not that first case. I'm objecting to what they're saying at this moment. Just look at the history in the 18th century, earlier, maybe a little later, the history of what that phrase, what kind of weapons was it addressing itself to? So I said, okay, I'll look it up. You know what? A Hildebard or a Haldebard, that's it. A skill ladder, an Asian fire, which you threw over the wall to burn people up on the other side of the wall. I mean, is that related to or not related to a pistol or artillery? Or to tell you the truth, I have no idea what those weapons were that were being used in 1710 or something, or in 1650, or during the 100 Years' War. You see, you, Mr. Dextrous, are asking me to turn awfully important cases upon matters where I am not an expert because I'm not an historian. I'm a judge. I can do this. I can go look at a couple of other things. Did you know, Mr. Majority, that 400 million guns are floating around this country? And those 400 million guns puts us number one on gun ownership. And those 400 million guns, a lot of studies show, cause an awful lot of trouble. They can cause deaths. They can cause illness. They can cause harm of all sorts.
In other words, a lot of unnecessary pain and suffering. I'm going to repeat it again. Unnecessary pain and suffering.
To policemen, to spouses, to everybody under the sun. Now, I think that fact, and facts like it, are relevant when you're deciding whether the New York gun law is or is not consistent with your idea of that Second Amendment.
Well, wait. Let me push back on that, because the Constitution says we have a right to bear arms. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say, gee, let's look at gun ownership and whether it's good or bad or not. Why would that matter when it comes to a constitutional question?
Oh, do you think it says that everybody has a right? I mean, if you're in a mental hospital, do you have a right to keep your arms? To keep guns around? Do you think you have a right after you shot 14 people? Do you think you have a right to shoot somebody when you're trying to steal some money? Do you think you have a right? You see, I can go on and on and on. No one, I think, will claim that everyone has a right to bear arms. You have to figure out which laws are permissible under the Second Amendment, just as you have to figure out under the First Amendment what speech is permissible and what speech is not. Hey, let's rob the bank. That speech, when that's seriously meant, that isn't permissible. Some is permissible, some is not. That's the job of the judge, to draw the limits and to work out what the statute means in terms of limits. So no one, textualist or non-textualist, is going to get away from that problem.
Okay, so let's go back now to the original concept of common law. So I'm going to explain something. And I was in front of a judge one time, and he said, "This is a legal system. Philosophy has no place in the legal system. Meanwhile, the whole construct of common law and the law used in the land of North America, the Commonwealth, and many other places based on God giving direction to the queen or king." What? God, through the spoken word, giving direction to the king or queen, passing that on to the legislators. And the legislators form the basis for legislation, for laws. And then it's up to the courts of the land to make sure that these laws are formed in such a way that it's appropriate. So this is how it all started. God spoke to the king or the queen. King or queen gave direction to the legislators. The legislators created laws for the people. And the court system, when need be, sprung into action to make sure that the legislators drafted it in an appropriate manner to be applied to the masses. Simple as that. Based on a friggin' spoken word from God that you've never met, a construct that's been created from the good book, you say. From the good book, construct from the good book. So we created this entity that lives on a cloud, that has buddies like Santa Claus that know when you're naughty or nice, that you sinned in perpetuity, and now you have to live a life of repenting that sin. And that's the religious aspect of it. But if a God is all forgiving and all loving, then that construct does not work. That's all I'm saying. Back to the shoe.
In Dobbs, they went back and they overruled two cases that allowed abortions, Roe versus Wade and Casey. And so I asked the imaginary Mr. Textualist, what cases are you going to overrule? Are you going to overrule every preceding case that doesn't use your originalist or textualist method? All of them? Do you know how many there are? I already said it. All of them. No, I exaggerate. Almost all of them. You mean you're going to overrule all those? We won't have any law left. Well, no, they won't overrule all those. So I say, which of the many that you could overrule, perhaps, which are you going to choose to overrule? And my guess is the answer is going to be the ones that are really wrong in our opinion. Really wrong in your opinion. And how are you going to decide that? Who's going to decide that? You're going to decide that. Now, will you just choose what you like or will you follow the law? Doesn't that sound like the question you asked of me a little bit earlier? The question that you said, textualism will stop me. I'll have to be honest because it'll give me no possibility of substituting my own judgment. You have the same problem, don't you? And anyone who doubts it, go read Dobbs.
Let me take what may be the biggest issue now, in which there's a clash between a textualist approach and a purpose-driven approach. And that's the whole arena of affirmative action and race-based thinking. The text of the Civil Rights Act is pretty clear. It says there cannot be discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And so if you have affirmative action, perhaps that's discriminating based on race. On the other hand, the purpose of that law was to bring African Americans more into society. How do you balance that when you take a more purpose or pragmatic-driven approach?
Well, it will depend on the particular case. What we've said, because Ruth and I wrote, several joined her opinion in Parents Involved and other cases. And
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
And we say roughly what you say, that there is a difference in terms of the 14th Amendment, which says every state shall not deny any person equal protection of the law. There is a difference between discrimination, which keeps people out, hurts them, separates the races, and that kind of discrimination which is designed to bring them in. Because bringing them into society and creating one society out of a world that had been divided, slavery and non-slavery, Jim Crow, etc., bringing them in so we have one country where we get along together. That was an objective of the 14th Amendment. And when you have something, discrimination, maybe call it discrimination, maybe say as Lewis Powell said in Bakke, he said there's room here. There is room for a town, a city, a state to work out a good way to bring these different races together in a world that previously had been divided legally. Do you see, that's the job. And what do you want? You want a mathematical rule? You won't get it. Law is not hard science. It is not calculus. You have human beings who are looking at the facts, the figures, yes, the statute, the Constitution, the values that underlie them, and you often have cases that require that judge to think, in terms of those values, does this statute go too far? Too far. That's the skill or the effort.
Justice Antonin Scalia was sort of one of the great advocates of the textualist approach. You've been one of the great advocates of the more pragmatic or purpose-driven approach. But y'all were pretty good friends, and you used to discuss it publicly and privately. Tell me about that.
No, we would. We liked it. We enjoyed it. The way it would sort of go, if I take bits of that conversation, I'd say, Nino, I don't say that the importance of free speech changes over time. I say George Washington didn't know about the internet. The facts changed. And he would say, I knew that. And he says, well, if we follow your system of, taking into account, I mean, do we take into account the fact that when they wrote these amendments, 18th century, Civil War, half the population, namely the women, were not part of the political process. And more than that, there was slavery much of that time, and Jim Crow. Do we take that into account? Maybe. And he say, you see, it's too complicated. Too complicated. You might be able to think you can do it, but nobody else can. And I say, well, maybe others have. I'm not the only one. But if we take your system, we're going to end up with a constitution that no one wants. Laws are designed, they're a human institution designed to help now 320 million Americans of every race, religion, point of view, help them live together peacefully and, we hope, prosperously.
Okay, I'm going to leave on that note. We're almost to the three-quarter point of the video. To live together peacefully and prosperously. So what do you want? What do you want? You want heaven on earth? You have the ability to create heaven on earth. Or do you want hell on earth? You have the ability to create hell on earth. A loving, harmonious, prosperous, and happy way of life? Or pain and suffering and survival of the fittest? Heaven on earth, hell on earth. Those are very simple ways of looking at things, folks. And you have the ability, you have freedom of choice, free will, to make the decision on how you choose to live a life. It's just as simple as that, but you get caught up in all the drama. All the drama. People thinking they're more important than other people. Everyone has a right to live. Doesn't matter who you are. Transgender, you can be queer, black, white, pink, purple, blue. It does not matter. Let all that stuff go. It serves no one. Loving, harmonious, happy, prosperous life, pain and suffering, and constant separation. It's a simple choice, one or the other. So I'm going to leave that with you. You're welcome to make comments. Sending love and peace to everyone. And remember what my good buddies do? They sometimes just do nothing. They sit on the couch. They do nothing. And they do not suffer any form of grief, sorrow, or lack of kindness towards themselves because they're taught that doing nothing and sitting on the couch is lazy way. The lazy way. There's nothing wrong with doing nothing. Sometimes you need to do nothing. Just saying. So here's the example. Sending love and peace to everyone. Take care. Comments greatly appreciated. Love you all. Ciao for now. Until the next time.